About to blow, I ain't done. They try to take my floor, I take their ass.
Brain comes under a system called nervous system. Nervous system is classified into two types: central nervous system (CNS) and peripheral nervous system (PNS). The central nervous system comprises of the brain and spinal cord. The spinal cord is the bridge that connects the brain to peripheral nervous system. It starts from medulla oblongata and stretches to lumbar region of the spine or vertebral column. The peripheral nervous system is a network of nerves spread across our body. An example of situation is how the peripheral nervous system connects the body with central nervous system. When you hold a hot cup of coffee, sensory neurons in your hand transmit signal to brain through sensory neurons, also called efferent neurons, that the cup is hot. Your brain processes that information and send response through motor neurons, known as efferent neurons, that you must put that cup back. Is the basic unit of nervous system. It is the nerve cell which transmit electrical signals to brain. A neuron has three parts: dendrites, soma or cell body, and axon. Dendrites serve as input device for neuron because it receives input from other nerve cells. Soma or cell body of neuron contains nucleus and serve as output device from where it transmits electrical response to other neurons. Our brain can be divided into main three parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and brainstem. Cerebrum is the largest part of brain, which can be further divided into right and left. Each cerebral hemisphere has four lobes, namely frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and temporal lobe. Each lobe performs different functions. Cerebellum is responsible for movement and coordination. It gives you sense of balance and thus prevent you falling. Brainstem includes midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. It controls your body involuntary action like breathing, heart rate, and blood pressure.
What is membrane potential? It refers to difference in electrical charge between inside and outside of neuron. When neuron at rest, the sodium ions and chloride ions are more prevalent outside, while potassium and organic anion are more prevalent inside the cell. And when at rest, inside neuron more negatively charged than the outside. It corrects the membrane potential, average neuron to be around negative 70 mV. Action potential occur when neurons send information down an axon. This involves an explosion of electrical activity where the nerve and muscles the resting membrane potential change, and an action potential has two main phases called depolarization and repolarization. Neuronal synapse. It was area where two neurons come close enough to one another that they are able to pass chemical signal from one cell to another. The neuron not actually connect but separate by microscopically small space called synaptic length. Presynaptic neuron, there are chemical signals called neurotransmitter that package into small sac called vesicle, and each vesicle can contain thousands of neurotransmitter molecules.
What is motor system? Motor system is actually part of central nervous system which is involved in movement. There are two types of motor system, which is the pyramidal system and the extrapyramidal. What the relation between the motor neurons in the motor system? Motor neurons actually are nerve cells which involve in carrying signals from the central nervous systems towards the muscles, which then can cause movements. This neuron contains of neurotransmitter, which when they release this neurotransmitter, it will trigger the response and leading into the movements of muscles. This movement either been voluntary movements or involuntary movements. There are two types of motor neurons, which is the upper motor neurons and the lower motor neurons. The upper motor neurons located near the central nervous systems, which is its travel between the brain and the spinal cord, while the lower motor neurons, located near the muscles, which is its travels between the spinal cord to the body muscles. The motor pathway involved in the motor system is called the pyramidal tract, or also known as the corticospinal tract. It serves or functions as the motor pathway for the upper motor neuronal sequence, which came out from the cerebral cortex and the primitive brainstem motor nuclei. The upper motor neurons of this pyramidal tract originate in the pyramidal cells. These cells are known as the best cells. These neurons originate from the Brodmann areas, which is at area 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6, which is the purple regions on the structures next to the explanations. These upper motor neurons go to the lower motor neurons through the midbrain nuclei, which consists of the rubrospinal tract, the vestibulospinal tract, the tectospinal tract, and the reticulospinal tract. The lower motor neuron consists of two tracts, which is the lateral corticospinal tract and the anterior corticospinal tract. The lateral corticospinal tract contains the upper motor neuronal axons and then synapse with the dorsal of the lateral lower motor neurons, while the anterior corticospinal tract comprises of 10% of fibers. These fibers in the anterior corticospinal tract do not decussate in the pyramidal decussation, but instead proceed down the ipsilateral sides of the brainstem to the spinal cord.
So, reflex action means reflexes in any response that occur automatically without conscious effort. The reason why reflex action occurs is because it is one of the protective mechanisms to protect the body from damage. There are two types of reflex action, which is conditional reflex, which is resulting by training and practice. There are five basic components in reflex action: receptor, afferent pathway, interneuron, efferent pathway, and effector. Do remember that interneuron exists in polysynaptic but not in monosynaptic reflex. Reflexes can be classified into several parts, which is by development, by response, by complexity of circuit, and by processing side. Now, let's take a look on characteristics of reflex action. As I mentioned before, monosynaptic reflex does not involve interneuron. Monosynaptic reflex is a direct communication between sensory neuron and motor neuron. Next, this somatic motor reflex has both synapse in central nervous system because this reflex involves many components. Therefore, there is a more prolonged delay between stimulus and response. So, as you can see in the diagram, monosynaptic is a one-way response. Meanwhile, polysynaptic contains more than one synapse. Therefore, this type of reflex involves interneuron. Now, innate somatic motor reflex is a stretch reflex or known as anti-gravity reflex. The function of this reflex is to keep the skeletal muscle leg fixed. As we know, gravity tends to pull our head and trunk down, but the muscle tone in certain muscle of back and neck overcome the force of gravity so that we can stand up straight and walk properly. Ipsilateral reflex occur when both receptor and effector organ are on the same side. For example, if our right hand touch the hot object, immediately we pull back our right hand away from the hot object. For contralateral reflex occur is when the sensory impulse from the receptor organ cross over through the spinal cord to activate the effector organ on the opposite limb. So, for example, if our left leg step on the sharp object, our right leg immediately try to balance the body and try to withdraw the left leg away from the sharp object. Muscle work in pair, so if one contract and the other relax. Reciprocal inhibition are seen in many reflexes involving antagonistic muscles such as bicep and tricep.
First, we will take a look at the introduction of autonomic nervous system. The sensory receptor, the nerves that connect receptor to the central nervous system, and the nerves that connect the central nervous system to effectors make up the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system consists of somatic nervous system and autonomic nervous system. The somatic division of the peripheral nervous system helps the body respond to changes in the external environment, while the nerves and the receptors that maintain homeostasis despite internal changes make up the autonomic division. Next, we will take a look at the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic division helps maintain homeostasis in the internal environment. For example, it regulates the heart rate and helps maintain a constant body temperature. The autonomic system works out automatically and without voluntary input. Its effectors are smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and glands. Afferent and efferent neurons of the autonomic division lie within cranial or spinal nerves. The efferent portion of the autonomic division is subdivided into sympathetic and parasympathetic system. Just like the somatic system, it is functionally organized into reflex pathways. Moving on, we will talk about the sympathetic division. Many organs are innervated by both types of the nerves, but sympathetic and parasympathetic system actually have opposite effects. In many cases, sympathetic nerves operate to stimulate organs and to mobilize energy, especially in response to stress. Sympathetic division prepares the body to react to a life-threatening or emergency scenario. Sympathetic division increases heart rate and widens the airway to make breathing easier. It causes the body to release more energy and muscular strength is increased. This division also causes palms to sweat, pupils to dilate, and hair to stare on end. It slows body processes that are less important in emergencies, such as digestion and urination. Here are some more examples of organs during sympathetic and parasympathetic division, but I will not go through it one by one since we have already discussed about some of the examples earlier. Last but not least, we are going to talk about dual innervation or sympathetic and parasympathetic division, where most effective targets of the autonomic nervous system receive innervation from both the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. These organs are said to be dually innervated. Typically, the sympathetic and parasympathetic system will have antagonistic effects on the organs. For instance, the heart is innervated by the sympathetic and parasympathetic fibers from the autonomic branch of the peripheral nervous system. Parasympathetic efferent fibers, also known as the vagus nerve, function is to reduce the heart rate, reduce force of contraction of the heart, vasoconstriction of the coronary arteries, and feedback on blood pressure. Sympathetic efferent fibers, also known as the cardiac nerve, the function is to increase the heart rate, increase force of contraction of the myocardium, feedback on blood pressure, and also pain sensation. As a conclusion for the autonomic nervous system, here's a line chart where we will start from the bottom moving upwards. Firstly, the peripheral nervous system branches into somatic nervous system and autonomic nervous system. Moving on, the autonomic nervous system also branches into sympathetic division and parasympathetic division. But only for some organs such as the heart will proceed towards dual innervation or sympathetic and parasympathetic